Hello everyone and welcome to Top Tips for Archaeology Graduates. Today we are joined by Sophie, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford. Hello Sophie, how are you today?
I am fine, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'd really love to hear a little bit more about what that means to be a postdoctoral researcher. What are some of the things that you do and what's your kind of day-to-day job like?
So as you say, I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the School of Archaeology at the University of Oxford, and I work in a lab called the Paleobarn Lab, which is a ancient DNA lab. And within the lab, we work mainly on different domesticated animal species. So I actually currently work mainly on dog remains, and the research that I do aims to try and work out how dogs were domesticated, the kind of timings of that, and any kind of associated genetic changes that dogs may have gone through being domesticated. And so because of that, I work on samples from lots of different time periods and lots of parts of the world. And so my kind of day-to-day job, part of the time I spend in the lab, so actually extracting DNA from the samples and processing them to get them ready to send for sequencing. And then the rest of the time I spend in the office, so analysing that data, looking at the DNA we've got in our different samples, and writing up the results into papers and for publications. And then I also undertake a little bit of teaching as well sometimes. So most recently here in Oxford, I've been teaching on a course on human evolution genetics, which has been really fun and exciting actually.
Great, so the real mixture of different things that you do during the day then.
Yeah,
so can you tell
varied.
us, always varied, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this role? What's your kind of career journey that's led you to this point?
Yeah, so I just took a BSc in archaeology at York quite a long time ago now. Started it back in 2000, I think. And during that, I kind of fell in love with both early prehistory and archaeological science. And so because of that, I decided to stay on at York, and I did an MSc in bioarchaeology in the bioarch group. And then following that, I really enjoyed my master's. And so I was fortunate enough then to be offered to stay on and do a NERC funded PhD in the bioarch group, which I finished a couple of years ago. And my PhD was focused on, it was trying to combine my two loves of early prehistory and archaeological science. And so it was a biomolecular study of how we look at different aspects of the British Mesolithic and Neolithic. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to use lots of different techniques during my PhD. So DNA analysis, zooms, stabilized analysis, ancient proteomics. And as I say, it was just really fantastic because it allowed me to kind of bring together the two things I'm most interested in, early prehistory and biomolecular archaeology. And really doing my piece at York, I really loved undertaking research, and so I decided that I'd like to try and carry on doing that for as long as I possibly could. And so then after I finished my PhD, I got a job working as a postdoctoral researcher on an ERC funded project called Up North, which was based at the Natural History Museum in London and the Institute of Archaeology at UCL. And that project was on the upper and final Paleolithic human recolonisation of Northwest Europe after the last glacial maximum. And so then after I finished that job, I started the job here in Oxford, again using biomolecular archaeology, but this time a bit of a change, moving on to domestic species and dogs.
You've moved quite a lot, not just in terms of technique, but also the different periods that you've studied as well. It's sort of allowed you to move about in different areas of prehistory. That's really interesting. You used quite a few acronyms there, so I just want to ask a few questions about that. So you said you had your PhD funded by NERC, which is the Natural Environment Research Council. How did that come about? Did you put in funding? How did that process of getting PhD funding come about?
So I believe it may have changed slightly now, but back when I applied for mine, there was a number of different projects which were offered in the department and projects after discussing that a lot with various different members of staff in the kind of bioarch group. And so, yeah, that was something that really appealed to me, because it was a project on the originally just on the Mesolithic, and I kind of broadened it out a bit into the Mesolithic and Neolithic, but in the bioarc group, so with the opportunity to explore using a lot of different scientific techniques on that.
And then the second acronym you used was the ERC, which is the European Research Council. So when you finished your PhD, did you you made a decision then to apply for funded projects? Can you tell me a little bit about that process? How did you go about from your PhD looking around for jobs and things like that?
Yeah, I think one of the crucial things was meeting people at conferences and talking to people. I had the opportunity during my PhD to attend a lot of different academic conferences, both archaeological science and prehistory conferences, and just kind of meeting people and chatting to people about opportunities that may have arisen, and always keeping my eye online on different websites and on Twitter. I think that's a really good way to see new job opportunities. And also, if you're fortunate enough to go to academic conferences, sometimes if somebody sees a job that they think might be suitable for you, they'll quite often email it over to you and say, have you seen this opportunity, which is a lovely thing to happen. So yeah, I was just keeping my eye on lots of different, applying for anything that I thought sounded really interesting, and I was really fortunate enough to get that job at the Natural History Museum there, which was a lovely place to work.
That's some really good advice in there, especially about, I think, because obviously I'm an academic as well, and I've been through this process of about going to conferences and getting to know people, and it can sound a bit business-like, I guess, to say networking, but actually it's just great fun to be meeting people and hearing about their research, but it's also really important for thinking about your career as well. Yeah. So perhaps I could ask a little bit now about your archaeology degree all those years ago. Yeah. Obviously you've stayed in archaeology itself, but what kind of skills and knowledges do you think it gave you, both, I guess, inside the discipline, but also some transferable skills, perhaps beyond archaeology itself?
Yeah, so obviously with my job, the knowledge that I obtained during my degrees at York, I pretty much use every day in my day-to-day job. And as I said, the project that I work on at the moment, we obtain lots of samples from lots of time periods and lots of different geographical locations. So having an understanding of the kind of archaeological context of the samples and having that kind of level of background knowledge, I think is really crucial. And because it then can allow us to link together any genetic information that we might get from samples with archaeology and kind of come to a better understanding of, I guess in this case, domestication or perhaps population movements in the past. And yeah, the broad kind of level knowledge that I also got of archaeological science during both my undergraduate and my master's has been obviously incredibly useful in my job, and has also been really useful when I'm thinking about my research, thinking about different research questions, or when you're working on with colleagues on different projects, they're using other different techniques to you, having kind of an awareness and understanding of what is, I think, really useful and can help you kind of tie things together a lot more. But I'd say from my undergraduate degree as a whole, I think I learned a huge number of skills just beyond kind of the archaeological knowledge that have been really useful in my career. I think in particular, the large number of kind of public speaking opportunities that I had during my undergraduate degree have been so incredibly useful. So doing things like presentations and seminars, the assessed seminars, assessed lectures, all kind of opportunities to talk to lots of different people in different scenarios have been really useful in giving myself kind of a familiarity and a confidence in public speaking, and also experience in how is the best way to present your research and how you explain different archaeological or scientific concepts to people. And I think that's useful, really useful, obviously in a research career where a lot of the time you're spending your days talking to people, either different collaborators, or perhaps you're giving a presentation at a conference, or talking to a local archaeological group or a society, or you're doing a public outreach event. But I think that's definitely a transferable skill, that even if you're beyond a research career, being able to present your ideas in an environment, whether that's in a boardroom environment or an office environment or an academic conference, it's the same skill set. And I think that's something that the degree at York was really good at, in getting us all really used to talking in front of different and sometimes quite varied audiences, and being able to explain different concepts to people. I think that was a really key skill that we all learned from the degree programme.
That's great, thank you. So bringing this interview, I guess, to a close a little bit, my final question then is, what advice would you give to graduates who wanted to follow in your footsteps? What sort of things do you think they should be doing?
So I would say to have a career in research and to really enjoy it, I think probably the most important thing is to find something that actually really interests you, that really grabs you, and then to try and pursue that if you can. So whether that's kind of a specific time period or a particular technique. But I think once you find something that you think, gosh, this is really interesting, you will then see that a large number of other different research avenues kind of open up to you, and you'll find lots of other things that you're then interested in. But I think finding that first thing that really captures you, your attention and kind of interest, is important, particularly because doing a research job, you sometimes have quite kind of self-motivated and self-driven. Sometimes working on a project by yourself, or perhaps in quite a small research team, and quite often you don't always have kind of a hard deadline of when you've got to produce things. So if you don't find what you're researching interesting, I think it could be a really hard job to undertake. But if you can find something that really interests you, an aspect of archaeology that you think, gosh, they're really exciting, then actually getting paid to spend your time doing it is, I just think, the best job in the world. It's a wonderful thing to do. And the nice thing about the degree, the undergraduate degree at York, is that you're exposed to and you learn about such a wide variety of different aspects of archaeology. So there's, I think with everybody that does it, everybody will find something that really grabs them. And I think when you meet other York graduates and the kind of different paths that they've all taken, they've all found different areas of archaeology which have interested them and led to different types of careers in archaeology and beyond. So yeah, but a career in research is a great job, I think.
I think that's great advice all round. Find things that you're passionate about, and take the opportunity to explore some of those different avenues and see where they take you. Okay, Sophie, thank you so much for joining us today. That was fascinating. Your research into dog domestication sounds just brilliant and huge amounts of fun. Thank you for talking us through life as a postdoctoral researcher, and to everyone else, thank you for joining us, and join us again next time for Top Tips for Archaeology Graduates. Thank you.